What's cracking, everybody? Felrose here, bringing you some Pokemon Go Battle League content. You know what? It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Happy holidays. Yeah, you're probably tired of hearing of all the Christmas music too, so I'm just going to cut to the chase here. Today we're talking about the Holiday Cup debuting in this upcoming rotation alongside our final week of Ultra League for this half of the season. And just like all of the kids nestled deep in their beds, or however the rhyme goes, she's nestled deep in my lap. And Santa's not coming tonight, so just leave it. She's sleeping. I'll just leave her alone. So in this particular meta breakdown, I'm not going to do it by groups. I'm just going to kind of go down the rankings list, and we're just going to talk about all the Pokemon briefly, understand their role in the meta, and if there's anything that's not directly listed on my meta breakdown pages, it's because they're either not going to be very common, or I wouldn't really worry about it too much. So, you know, this whole list starts off, you know, top 8, and then cuts down and passes Pachirisu. Why? Because Pachirisu is not going to be a hugely common Pokemon. Yes, you should be aware of it, but it's not something that's going to be breaking the meta apart or doing anything other than just being a really thick squirrel. So, Aurorus being number 1 on the rankings. Aurorus getting that access to Meteor Beam really buffed it up in this cup, makes it an extremely accessible anti-fly. Well, I don't want to say accessible, but if you're hatching 7k eggs or we're around for the event that it debuted, and hopefully you got a good one. I've been working my butt off to try and get them built for Ultra League and Great League, so basically, really solid anti-flyer. Ice and Rock as hard as of an anti-flyer as you get. Also, on the flip side, though, double super effective damage taken from counter. So things like Vigoroth and Obstagoon going to completely destroy this poor Aurorus' soul. Lantern being a water type, resisting ice type. Abomasnow is able to get to the Energy Ball, I imagine, and Double does the double kick fighting type damage to really put the hurt on Aurorus. So, but, you know, Aurorus, as you've seen on the channel this week in Ultra League, and honestly last week in the Remix Cup, or I think it was a Remix Cup. I don't know. Well, I put it on the channel at some point. You know what I mean. I think I did. Man. I'm getting old. Anyway. A good safe swap to draw out something that would beat the Aurorus' Double, which we also had get a move update last season and haven't seen it in the game since. Niantic, please bring back Double. We really need a new event with Double. So really solid against the ice types. The double kick allows it to do fighting type damage, much like Vigoroth, without having the fighting typing associated with it. Also a really solid safe swap, just like Vigoroth. Has a really solid charge move pool, and just having Body Slam itself is good, but Wild Charge and Payback are really good coverage options depending on the meta you're playing in. Payback is probably ideal here just because of Trevenant. But you could run Wild Charge if you're seeing a much more flyer heavy meta. Lantern, super consistent. Running Water Gun in this cup, I honestly still think you go for Spark for the most part, but you definitely could go Water Gun. It beats more things just by, you know, access of the or by attributed to the Water Gun fast move damage, but the energy gain not so great. So really depends on the team comp. I think you can run it with Water Gun if you're running it in a certain way. Obviously you could also run it with Spark if you're running it different. It's going to completely depend on your team comp. So two very solid Pokemon in this meta, normal types with counter, Obstagoon, and Vigoroth. You've seen them in many cups before. You're going to want the cross chop on Obstagoon in Great League typically. You don't want one with Obstruct. It just, there's not enough bulk here to make it matter. And then Vigoroth is basically the normal type counter user that loses to the Trevenant. So thankfully Trevenant's not really high on these rankings, so you may not see it as often, but be aware that your Vigoroth does lose to the Portree. But those are two very solid Pokemon. Honestly, they make up their own backline as well. Vigoroth just having counter Body Slam is just a ridiculously spammy strong Pokemon. And obviously, you know, there's going to be wins and losses. They're all kind of really obvious ones. Noctowl being one of the more interesting ones for these two, because despite them being fighting type, almost, you know, pseudo fighting types rather, Obstagoon and Vigoroth can actually tangle with Noctowl because they don't take super effective damage from the flying type moves that Noctowl puts out. And Shadow Bell is not a move that can really damage them anyway, so Altaria comes in at number 6 here. Going to be a super solid Pokemon. It's kind of been around in all of the holiday cups that we've had. Really just loses to Ice and even the Steel. Lickitung obviously is in this meta as a normal type, and hopefully you already know the types allowed in this meta are Electric, Grass, ice, normal, fire. I don't know off the top of my head. I just know that they're here. I don't even think fire is one of the types because I don't see very many fire. No, there's Charizard, but he's a flying type. I don't know, whatever. Flying type's one of them. That's why there's so many flyers in this meta. But anyway, that being said, next up I've got Walrein and Abomasnow on the list. Abomasnow clocks in as a shadow at number 9 and number 17 is the normal. I think I like Shadow Abomasnow typically better because just the damage it can put out is really insane. And having that extra boost from a damage for something that has a good fast move and has really good spammy charge moves, it really makes things actually kind of nice for the Abomasnow, because having that little less bulk really doesn't matter when your moveset's that strong and spammy. So Walrein comes in here because Walrein is good in every meta that it's ever been in forever. And it actually comes down here. The Shadow's number 18, and I believe, 25 for the non-Shadow, which is kind of low for Walrein, but that's because of the Powder Snow nerf. Or not the Powder Snow nerf, the Icicle Spear nerf, rather. So, next crew, here up, we've got the next set in the rankings. We've got Alolan Graveler coming up here. Now, if y'all were around in the channel last year when I was playing Holiday Cup, I did a couple videos. One of them had Alolan Graveler in it, and that thing just shreds, by the way. It's basically like how we were having Ampharos this week in Ultra League Premier Cup. The Volt Switch hit so hard, and that rock damage coverage is just really strong, especially because you're seeing a meta full of ice types, flying types, things that are weak to the rock and or electric damage. And I mean, honestly, just about everything but the Vigoroth and the Dubwool and the Obstagoon, like almost everything here does not want to deal with a Alolan Graveler, especially not one with energy. So that's, you have to be careful with Alolan Graveler though, because it does have Volt Switch, which means it's a slow Pokemon that doesn't really have much flexibility as far as its fast move goes. But that thing can absolutely just go to town on a team if it's not ready for it. It's that strong. It snowballs very quickly. Alolan Sandslash is something that I have started to really enjoy playing lately, and when you have a meta that's expected to have a bunch of flyers, some ice types, and Frostlass especially, Alolan Sandslash is going to have a good time. You can run it with Shadow Claw as the legacy move, or you could even run it with just Powder Snow. You don't necessarily need one or the other. Shadow Claw just has a better overall coverage, and most of the normal types that you're going to play against with anyway, the Steel typing is going to come in handy there anyway. So, yeah, do not record your videos at 12:30 at night. It's embarrassing, yawning this much. But Magnezone is going to clock in next here. Shadow Magnezone as well. And essentially, this is going to kind of cover everything with Wild Charge, right? All of these Wild Charge users are basically bait dependent, so they're really high on the rankings because they like, for example, like Luxray gets the bait and then hits him with the Wild Charge after the shield's down. Realistically, they may not always happen that way, so you have to be very cognizant of something like Togedemaru, which I totally skipped over, or Magnezone, is that typically speaking, these matchup sims are only winning when you get the successful bait with the bait move and then hit them with the Wild Charge. And yes, Wild Charge will one-shot a lot of things in this cup, but you also have to realize that by losing all that defense, something could probably just farm you down at that point, or force your shield off of you. It's a trade-off. I'm not going to talk about Cast Form because it's just an ice type user straight up. It's really like, it's okay, but it's very linear, so I wouldn't worry about Cast Form too much. You probably won't see it. It's high up on the rankings because I thought it had Blizzard. No, it has Ice Beam, but it's because of all of the flying types, I think, is why Cast Form Snowy does well. Snowy Cast Form's got a good moveset. Like having Weather Ball and Ice Beam, like that's still good. It's just unfortunate that it's all ice and doesn't have any covered moves. Alolan Ninetales, in a meta that has all ice types and has flying types, a charm user that can resist the ice damage and can put pressure on flying types is really strong. However, you have to be careful because things like Charizard and Magnezone and these rock types and things that basically do a lot of damage, basically everything above Ninetales is a problem for it. So especially after the charm nerf, that may not be an ideal thing to do, but Alolan Ninetales will be out there. You need to be ready for it. Frostlass honestly should be higher. Frostlass is busted in just about every meta it's in, and because there's not as many steel types in this meta to really kind of deal with it, it gives it a very advantageous position in which it can actually sweep or safe swap or basically fill any role on a team with energy advantage. A Frostlass can just go to town, especially if the shield advantage included. Dugong next up on this list here that I've got, Dugong. I reached a little bit for Dugong. I haven't talked about, Charizard. Charizard, before I get to Dugong, I guess. The brand new wing attack buff makes Blast Burn an absolute menace, has Dragon Claw. Doesn't really have any other moves that it would really want to use, though, so you don't really have any flexibility and surprising with the moveset. But I don't think you really need to, because Charizard is just, the Blast Burn is so powerful, especially in Great League. You can one-shot so many things in this meta with it, and Dragon Claw being a bait move means that you can threaten with that Blast Burn, get a shield, and then hit with the Blast Burn. So, very strong Charizard now with the wing attack buff. Easily a good safe swap or a good closer in this meta, especially when things like Frost Slash are about. Now, Dugong is on this list here because it is a very bulky Pokemon and has Icy Wind and Ice Shard. It's been around for a long time, so if you haven't been around for a long time, just the basics on Dugong is it's very bulky and thrives on being able to lengthen out a matchup by giving you a bunch of Icy Wind debuffs. Now, not a lot of Pokemon are able to really tangle with it one-on-one in this meta because not only do you have Ice Shard and Icy Wind, but you also have the threat of Water Pulse. So if you have something like a Alolan Graveler, you have to be afraid of the Water Pulse because it actually does do reasonable damage. But overall, there's plenty of things that do beat Dugong in this meta, so you're probably going to be using at least one of them on your team, to be honest. If you're using Amoris or Aurorus, then there you go. That's it. Pidgeot is the last thing on this page. Newly buffed wing attack yet again. And I'm sure by now we all know how strong Pidgeot is. It's been on just about every YouTube channel that has existed in the last month or so. And having be able to get to that Feather Dance and Brave Bird as quick as it can, if it's not locked in against something that hard counters it, Pidgeot has so much play. It's just insane. So next up on the list, we're kind of going a little bit further down here. Zangoose does pop into the list here. A lot of people enjoy using Zangoose. You've probably got one built from Retro Cup. This is a place where you can use it. You've got the threat of close combat, and you've got Night Slash to fish for boosts and bait with, so it's a very strong move, very strong move set, I should say, and Pokemon in general. Lickitung, I mean, I've stopped looking at wins and losses at this point, which I probably could do, but it would just make this video much longer. And for the most part, I mean, I trust that all of you guys are more than capable of really kind of going through the wins and losses and things on PvPoke. So I'm using the rankings as a visual aid, but what I'm really doing is I'm using my own visual aids as a way to progress through the list itself and talk about the Pokemon briefly instead of opening up and talking about all their matchups. Because honestly, like, I can tell you what Lickitung can do, but we'll be here all day because Lickitung can do a lot. So Lickitung is a de facto safe swap kind of Pokemon, able to lure out anything like fighting types. Definitely kind of lost some traction with Noctowl being as popular as it has been now. It kind of breaks up the Lickitung Metacham core in Great League, and then also here you have a threat of a lot of normal types that Lickitung can just get locked into, and Lick damage doesn't do anything to those. So next up on the list, though, one of my absolute favorites, and I'm probably going to use it again, is Dunsparce. Dunsparce has Rock Slide and Drill Run and the fast move Rollout. Now, if y'all are in this channel and you see last couple of weeks ago, and it was in Remix, I played the Dunsparce. The Dunsparce is a god. It's just so good. It has descended from the heavens with those little angel-looking wings of its, and it just says, you guys have been blessed by my presence. You may use me as a safe swap, and you may dominate your Go Battle League. And speaking of dominating Go Battle League, we'll take a second here and show myself, because it's very, very helpful to be in a community that you can thrive with, talk to, and get better at Go Battle League, not only through each other, but also through all of my boundless tips and knowledge that I am happy to give to the Patron Discord. If you want to check that out, there's a link in the description for that Patron Discord, where you can get basically early access to the videos, the meta tips, the analysis, the teams that I'm going to be running. Everything is done, even sometimes weeks in advance, depending on how much time I've got to look at it. So interesting. If that interests you, go ahead and check that out. Link in the description. And also, if you're looking to elevate your gameplay to the next level and hit that next rank, could that be Ace? Maybe you've never hit Ace before. That's totally okay. And maybe you're looking to hit Legend. Anything in between there, doesn't matter. I'm happy to help coach any level of skill and any level of player. You are a sleepy babby. You should go to sleep. It's all good. It's all something to be proud of. It doesn't matter what rank you are. You should still be proud of it. So, Metafine link in the description for that. Little child, I need my hand back, please. We'll talk about Mandibuzz in the meanwhile. So Mandibuzz is in this meta as a flyer. Honestly, it has play, but there's so many ice, electric, and rock types in this meta. I don't feel like the flyers are going to be as very dominant. Oh, who's on upset, baby? You should go back to sleep. Here, I'll sit like this so you can go back to sleep. It's okay. Shh. Sweet dear. Oh, I know, my sweetie. I know you're tired. Ooh, random transition. We put Maggie to sleep. She's a happy girl. She's sleeping in her bed for now. So we'll continue going on with these rankings. Next up, we got Snorlax. Now, Snorlax is like a Lickitung light almost. Honestly, like, still has like normal damage, normal typing, has that body slam, but also has the superpower coverage. Honestly, you could run it with some other coverages too, like Earthquake. Typically going to want to go with superpower in a meta like this, though, and it's basically Lickitung light. That's what it is. If you don't have a Lickitung, you can do with a Snorlax, but honestly, Snorlax is going to do better in the upper leagues where the bulk matters more. Next up, we've got Lantern, or not Lantern, that's Lantern, that's Mantine. Mantine recently also a beneficiary of the buff to wing attack. So Mantine is a little bit further down, but has the Ice Beam coverage, is able to beat things like Altaria, Marowak, you can beat Trevenant, the Bomb of Snow, even beats Obstagoon, because honestly, Mantine is super, super bulky. Obviously, though, when it comes to the anti-flyers, so you're going to have things like Lantern, Aurora's Frostlass, it really doesn't have the bulk to, however, deal with those offensive powerhouses, Meteor Beam, Spark damage, things like that. So, Mantine is still a super interesting pick in this meta. Right alongside its friend Pelipper with the water flying typing. I think both of them are poised to do pretty well in a meta like this with his, the wing attack buff just really did wonders for them. And then coming up, excuse me. Coming up next, we've got Galvantula. Galvantula being really solid for those fighters, those, the brain fart, Obstagoon and Vigoroth. There we go. But also was able to do really well against the flyers because obviously it's electric type. Has Volt Switch, very offensively weighted, and having that lunge is going to give that a shot to lower the opponent's stat. The attack stat before they can really get to much, because honestly, Volt Switch Lunge is a super quick combo. 12 turns is very fast to get to a charge move, especially when it comes to a debuff. And Galvantula just is, it's been around long enough. You kind of understand that it's very frail, but has a lot of attack to it, and also just gets the attacks out really fast. So you got to be ready for it. It will be there, especially when the flyers become more numerous in numbers, right? That makes a lot of sense. But you get my point. Now, Sableye is down here as well as Skarmory. They're like Great League kind of meta powerhouses, but in the meta like this, where for the most part, there's a lot more normal types and things that can beat the Sableye straight up. I think that Sableye is still a good safe swap, and in general, it's always going to be great. But I think in this particular meta, it is a little bit lower on the rankings, but rankings aren't everything, as we say. A lot of the upper Pokemon here, aside from like the normal types, really like are neutral into Sableye. So you really have a good shot with almost most of this meta for Sableye to do well here. It's just when you get to the normal types like Pidgeot, Dunsparce, Dubwool, Lickitung, things like that, that's where Sableye may struggle a bit. But if you're in a spot of the meta where you don't see a whole lot of those normal types, Sableye could be a very good pick. And then Skarmory is going to do really well here when it comes to dealing with almost nothing. Because just about most of the meta is anti-flyer up in the top rankings. So you've got a lot of rock and ice here. Even Lantern. You've got Aurora's, like Dubwool even could potentially be an anti-flyer because of that wild charge. And a Bomb of Snow. Even like some of the, grass types have a good play. So like I don't see Skarmory being super strong here, but when you have something like Pidgeot, even I guess Lickitung's not a good example because Lickitung can actually beat it too. But some of these things that like rely on wing attack and don't have coverage for flyers, like that could be where Skarmory really does okay. But overall, Skarmory, it's here because it has Brave Bird, essentially, because it is able to overpower some of these not so tanky Pokemon. But overall, I don't think that Skarmory, I put it here because I wanted to highlight the fact that even though it's within like the top 50, I don't think it's going to do very well at all. Most flyers are already playing a lot of risk by being in a meta field with electric types, but Skarmory, don't even play with me, man. So coming up next, we've got some more Pokemon here on the rankings. Spot the Stunfisk. let me know in the comments if you found the Stunfisk. It's so small, I can barely find it. Alolan Marowak as a shadow is one of my favorite Greatly Pokemon ever, and it is in this meta. But you've got to be very careful with it because it does not do well against some of the top Pokemon. And why I say that is because Auroras can one-shot it with Meteor Beam. You've got Lantern, very prevalent in this meta. Altaria is going to be very prevalent in the meta. You have to basically be able to pick and choose where it's going to be. Now, when it comes to the ice types, destroy them. Bone Club can do a lot of damage to these electric types because most of them aren't that bulky, or they could be double weak, like Togedemaru and Magnezone are double weak to ground types, so that's going to be really good too. But I think that Alolan Marowak has play here. You just have to pick the right place for it, and have to be making sure that the things that you're seeing in the meta aren't all going to destroy your Marowak. Piloswine is going to come up next year, and it's one that I used a lot in the last season of Holiday Cup. So there is a channel way back. I'll probably forget to link it because I'm really bad at that kind of thing. But it did get high horsepower as a better coverage move over Bulldoze. So if you're running Stone Edge, that's fine to hit the ice types, but you could also definitely run high horsepower for some of that stab ground damage. And then Avalanche is just super strong. Noctowl is in the meta as well, and we all know Noctowl by now. Normal flying type that has a lot of play with a lot of bulk, and in it, again, I mean, the flyers in this meta, filled with electric and ice, I don't see them having a huge place until the meta maybe has settled in and there's a more condensed meta that kind of shows itself here. Because if this Noctowl gets basically on everything that's not a ghost, it's toast. So, Celio, a favorite of mine from a couple years ago when I started doing this channel. Actually, that's going to be one of the first videos I put up with Shadow Celio, and pair it with Trevenant, honestly, or you could pair it with, I actually had my Holiday Cup, it was a Great League Remix team. I think it was a Great League Remix team, like the very first time we had it or something. It was like Celio, Trevenant, Noctowl. It was a very strong team, but Celio is just, it's super spammy, has the neutral body slam damage for the most part. Not many things can really keep up with that kind of bulk and speediness of moves, but again, it kind of got outdone by Walrein when Walrein got Icicle Spear. So your mileage may vary, but Celio is still a very strong kind of Great League pick to have, and I would prefer a Shadow much more so over a regular because that extra little oomph in the damage is meaningful. Pelipper is also really strong here. It has very quick access to Weather Ball now. It goes very quickly with Wing Attack now. But again, you have to be cautious. Just like I've said with all the other flyers, electrics and ice are going to be everywhere. So you have to be careful. Speaking of ice, Lapras is in this meta. That's another ice water type. Has access to Skull Bash. You can run it with Ice Beam if you like, but I think I would just go with Skull Bash Surf. Very bulky Pokemon, so it's got a lot of very good potential here, especially because the meta is going to be filled with some things that are kind of weak to ice. So like you're talking about, things like Altaria gets completely boned by it. You've got, Alolan Graveler is not going to, care much for taking a surf, but obviously will do tons of damage back in kind, but also because Lapras can double resist ice damage, and that's really big in a meta that's filled with all these ice types. So if you found the Stunfisk, great. If you haven't, it's there. Keep looking. The Stunfisk is going to be on this list somewhere. Here it is. Number 58 on the rankings. It's not like a super high place, but it's basically like a mixture of anti-flyer and anti-steel, even there's not really any steel in the meta. But if you're seeing like maybe more fire types, this would be a good kind of core breaker to have. But honestly, just Galarian or Unova Stunfisk is a very good Pokemon to break up some of the stuff that the electrics it can absolutely destroy. It even actually has good play against Auroras because of that Mud Bomb. And it's very spammy, and it can completely shut down all the electrics, like completely. So worthwhile Pokemon to keep an eye out if you think that it looks like a good core breaker. It's worth a shot. Trevenant is really low on these rankings though, and I mean with good reason. I mean in a meta that's filled with flyers and ice, they keep saying that even though it's filled with electric too, like it's basically going to become an RPS around the flying, electric, and Trevenant basically. That's what it comes down to. And Diggersby's also here. We know Diggersby because of its normal typing. It does have Earthquake, it does have Hyper Beam, it does a Fire Punch, but because of the fact that there's not really any steel, that's why the Diggersby really isn't super high on the rankings because all of the ice and the flying types that are up here kind of just knock it down many pegs. So. Now this last page is going to be some stuff that I feel like has some hidden potential in the meta. So I'm not going to go through the rankings because they're all pretty low. Venusaur kind of speaks for itself. The Frenzy Plants hit really hard. If you play one with a Shadow, you can two-shot a Trevenant with Frenzy Plant, win the 2-shield scenario if you land one Frenzy Plant. And because of the electrics and because of the fact that there's a lot of rock types mixed in here, Venusaur could have some play. Hisuian Avalugg is a Pokemon that isn't even in the game yet, but it could be debuting in the next section of the Holiday Cup, or Holiday event. So if that does come to the game, keep an eye out for it, because honestly, the moveset on this thing is kind of nuts. If I can find it, Powder Snow, Rock Slide, Crunch. That's a pretty darn good moveset, if I might be so bold as to say so. It doesn't have any stab ice damage. I think it has like Blizzard maybe. Yeah, it gets Blizzard for the stab ice damage. So there's that, but I like Hisuian Avalugg. It's a very interesting core breaker, but again, just like Aurora's, it's an ice rock type, I believe, I think. Yes, ice and rock. So it's double weak to fighting, so you have to be careful of that. But the Rock Slide and the Crunch are just really nice coverages. Well, I guess Galarian Moltres could be here if it was actually allowed in this meta. Which it is, actually. Galarian Moltres is allowed, but it's way, way down here. But Moltres got Overheat and Sky Attack as its charge move, and it got the Wing Attack buff. So it can realistically get to these moves in order to compete in this meta. Now, unfortunately, the only way you're going to do fire damage with Moltres is through Overheat, which means you have to debuff yourself. So not ideal, but still worth mentioning because it is a new buff Pokemon from the Wing Attack update. Litleo. I gotta talk about Litleo because it just got Incinerate, and in any meta that you have Frostlass, you're gonna see Litleo if it is there, because it is one of the hardest counters to Frostlass, and honestly getting that Incinerate buff makes it really nice. It's able to get to those charge moves very quickly now, as opposed to having Fire Fang or Ember. So Litleo XL fans, rejoice, your time is nigh. Dedenne, something that I played last time we had the Holiday Cup. Very strong Pokemon, very good in a meta that is filled with flying types, and if you have a lot of things like the Goon and Vigoroth. Now, I think that the Wing Attack buff has kind of made it more flyer heavy, but at the same time also made it a bit more ice and rock heavy, so that may make Dedenne not as much of a strong pick in this meta as it was last time, but it is still a very fun pick. You know, it really just kind of crushes a lot of the fighting types because of its fairy typing, and also has a lot of play against anything else that's not a ground type, because Discharge just comes out so quickly. And speaking of Discharge coming out so quickly, we also have Zapdos in the meta. The Drill Peck and Thunderbolt coverage is really, really interesting here. Being able not only to be an anti-flyer, but also like an anti-grass. It just gives it a lot of flexibility. Obviously not going to do very well against most of those rock types, or ice types in general. It's very frail, so it's just kind of like a meme pick, but it's still fun. Like, you can't go wrong when you're playing something that like. Golbat got a buff from Wing Attack as well. Gets to Shadow Ball much quicker now, and the Poison Fangs are still the same. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Poison Fang, but being able to get to those Shadow Balls even quicker may make the Golbat even more potent, and it makes a really good safe swap as well. And the final thing that's kind of on these rankings that isn't really super high is Dragonite. You put Dragonite in the right place, give it some farm, and those superpowers are suddenly very threatening. And it also is able to resist a lot of the elemental picks, like the fire types that are in here, the grass, the water, like those are all going to get resisted. But there's so many ice types in this meta though, that most likely, I mean, Dragonite's not going to get used very much, but being able to throw a superpower at a nice type after being, getting some farm and swapping in is really, really handy. So finally, we'll talk about some cores, round this video out right around the 30-minute mark or so. The Walrein Trevenant core is always prevalent. It exists, it's there, and I put Sableye there because it kind of fits, I guess. But honestly, they all get core broken by Obstagoon, so have fun with that core. Another core that I really like a lot is the Pelipper A-Slash core. Alolan Sandslash is a core breaking kind of Pokemon that actually has a lot of play in a meta like this, where the Shadow Claw helps it deal with ghosts, and it has the ability to deal with ice, which means Ice and Steel typing also make it a very strong anti-flyer, while also having Bulldoze to cover the electrics. It's a very versatile Pokemon in a meta like this, where it kind of covers all three of the main types. And then Pelipper cores very well with it. Anti-fighter, also anti-fire. This is just a very good typing core with a alolan Sandslash. Next core I have on the bottom left here is going to be the Aurorus Lantern combo. This is going to be one of the strongest combos in the cup, so be very, very careful of it. This is why I'm thinking that Venusaur might have a lot of play in this meta, because Venusaur can almost one-shot in Aurorus with a Frenzy Plant, and honestly, it can probably one-shot with a Lantern. I've been on the receiving end of a Frenzy Plant. It's pretty close. So, but overall, just in general, like Lantern's bulk allows it to take a lot of the matchups that Aurorus can't deal with. Although they're not also convincing, they're still wins. And then the final core I have here is going to be the Altaria and electric / weak to fighting kind of core here. So you've got Magnezone and Graveler kind of filling similar roles here, and then they're weak to fighting but also strong anti-flyer options. And then also Altaria just being what it is. In a meta like this where the typing is condensed, you're not necessarily looking at, is it weak to fighting or is it weak, strong to fighting? You're looking at, does it beat Lantern? Because Altaria convincingly beats Lantern, which the other two may struggle with just because of their less bulk, and also the fact that they take neutral damage or super effective damage from water type damage in Surf. So the 4 safe swaps that I like the most in this cup are in the middle here. We've got Charizard, which I think is a really smart, strong safe swap, unless you get met with a Lantern, which is probably the only reason why I might shy away from it, is because you draw the Lantern, you're kind of screwed. But otherwise, Charizard is able to get shields and put a lot of pressure on a lot of things because of how fast it gets to Blast Burn and Dragon Claw. Dunsparce, you're already well aware of, having the coverage of Rock and Ground. There's not a lot on this page by itself that Dunsparce couldn't do a lot of damage to, and even then, the only things on this page that actually don't take those kinds of damage is the Vigoroth and the Double, which I like Double a lot because you safe swap a Double. It's got Double Kick, it's got Body Slam, it's got Payback. So it's able to deal in kind that fighting type damage back to things like Vigoroth, and it's able to actually outpace them to the Body Slams as well. It gets there in 9 turns as opposed to 10 turns from the counter damage into Body Slam. So it actually can beat in the one shield a Vigoroth. It's kind of nuts. It's IV dependent as well, but it can do it. And I think that that's a really strong quality in a safe swap, is being able to potentially beat one of your hardest counters. Sign me up. I don't have a good double though for Great League, so I'm kind of SOL. And then Vigoroth is a tried and true safe swap. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be good. It's got that super spammy, stab moveset of Body Slam with the counter damage to boot. Can't go wrong with that. And that's really going to round out the Holiday Cup. We'll be doing an Ultra League version of this one next week. But that, my friends, is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sitting through this meta-analysis with me. I hope it helps you guide your teams and get a bunch of ELO with some of these cores and picks that we've got laid out here. So thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.